Recording in progress.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining this Temasek Foundation and WAN-IFRA journalism program. Are we winning the COVID-19 disinformation war? I'm Fergus Bell, the founder and CEO of Fathom, a news lab and consultancy based in the UK, and I've been the lead facilitator of the in-person part of this program that started in 2022. It's a pleasure now to convene people online for this part of the program. Each new wave of COVID or other health crises brings fresh attempts to mislead, deceive, or control the narrative. Today in this webinar, we'll explore the strategies being used to counter a growing ecosystem of disinformation and understand from the people on the front lines, the tools that can equip journalists and newsrooms for continuous battle to mitigate those harms. But before we start, I have a few housekeeping rules. Let me just share my screen. So firstly, do switch on your cameras as it really helps for me to put a face to all names if the speakers and participants. And if you aren't comfortable keeping your camera on, please do consider having a photo in your profile. We encourage you to have an interactive session. So if you want to speak, raise your hand in order to ask a question at any point, and I'll do my best to spot that and come to you. And also you can put a question in the Q&A, where I will also do my best to spot it and read it out and put it to the panelists. So to introductions, joining me today is Rachel Blundy, who is the Head of Digital Investigations APAC for AFP and based in Hong Kong. Shelly Walia, who is Executive Editor at the Quint, based in Delhi, and Chen, the Editor-in-Chief of the Taiwan FactCheck Center, based in Taipei. So I'm going to kick off the session by asking each person in turn for some brief remarks on, well, not that brief actually, you can with a bit of explanation on what the situation in terms of misinformation and disinformation is like in the country, region or field that they cover or their organization covers, with a specific focus on health and science. So I will stop sharing my screen so that everyone can see and throw immediately over to Rachel. Rachel, what is the misinformation ecosystem like for you as a journalist covering the patch that you do for AFP?
Yeah, so thanks, Fergus. The patch that we cover is very varied. We're covering 15 countries and territories in Asia Pacific. So we see big variations in the amount of misinformation being shared in different countries and also the types of misinformation. So, for example, somewhere like India or Indonesia, there would be a relatively high volume of misinfo. Typically, a lot of it will be what we might refer to as cheap fakes, things like photos and videos being recirculated in a false context that we can then do reverse image searches to fact check. And then I guess one of the more sort of moderate markets that we cover would be somewhere like the Philippines or perhaps Pakistan. The volumes are perhaps not as high, but the misinfo is equally causing people to avoid traditional or more Western style medicine, and to self-medicate sometimes, which can be risky. And then we go down to more conservative markets such as Singapore and I guess places like Cambodia, where there's a more kind of restrictive political environment, and there are quite strict anti-misinformation laws, which campaign also has in terms of speech. I mean that the amount of misinformation we see significantly lower than some of those, and it's very kind of different approaches that we take in each market.
Thank you. Shelley, what's it like in India? What do you see in terms of health and science mis and disinformation specifically?
So, I mean, one of the most common refrains that we saw during the COVID pandemic was, this reliance on the Indian herbs and Indian treatments and Ayurvedic treatments. And, there was a common saying that, whatever you need to cure COVID or to protect yourself from COVID was available in the Indian kitchen. So this is, as Rachel was saying, that it can be very, very risky because it gives people that false sense of security. And there were a lot of photos being circulated about inhaling steam and from, consuming copious amounts of jeera water. And so there were all of these remedies, which were home remedies, which were specifically being circulated. So in the health and science space, we do see a lot of misinformation, which is to do with Indian herbs and this sort of like reliance on building immunity by using those. The other thing which actually emerged a lot during COVID was how it was so interlinked with the politics of the country. So in a polarizing environment, misinformation and disinformation was typically used to target minorities. And to give you some context, in March 2020, there was an international congregation of Tablighi Jamaat, a Muslim organization which was underway in Delhi. This congregation had people coming in from all the different countries, and it was sort of already in place before there was any ban which was imposed on gatherings in the country. What we saw was, and once the testing started, a lot of people who had come in touch with, people who were participating in the congregation were testing positive. And what we saw was literally disinformation, which was emanating from the fact that it was a super spreader event, which was absolutely baseless. Also, we saw a lot of trolls starting, online, which was to do with like a hashtag Corona Jihad and hashtag Thuk Jihad, which was basically like Muslims were spitting on people and spreading the virus. So there was a lot of disinformation, which was intrinsically linked to, like targeting the minorities. And we also saw like it manifesting in some physical violence. So that was absolutely, that was very, very fabricated, but at the same time, very, very dangerous. The other trend that kind of interlinks itself with misinformation and disinformation in India is what is propagated by our political leaders. So there was a lot of cure which was being talked about by political leaders, again, baseless, consume cow urine, and something which is, something which we had to constantly keep going back to doctors and experts, and even, to sort of like present the facts, which after a point also becomes very repetitive. The Indian family WhatsApp groups is something that I think people know about a lot. And it's also something that when you talk about it, you also have to keep in mind that there is a huge Indian diaspora outside the country where the misinformation is traveling to. So, like the stuff circulating on WhatsApp, the stuff circulating on Telegram, a lot of anti-vaxxers groups came into existence during the pandemic and even after, which was to do a lot with these anti-vax campaigns and movements. A lot of fake doctors became part of it. They were constantly being called out. They were constantly being reported. But at the same time, they had huge and massive following, which was leading to a lot of disinformation. I just want to mention one more point about how with Telegram, there is no limit to the number of people who can join a group. And that also kind of made it very dangerous, with a lot of people joining in and consuming that information. So yeah, these are some of the sort of broad challenges and trends that we have been seeing in the health and science space vis-a-vis COVID per se.
Thank you. I definitely want to follow up and ask you a bit more about that in detail in a moment. Summer, over to you, and I've got some slides to share, which I will bring up now. As you start talking, they will magically appear.
Sure. Hi, this is Summer. I'm the chief editor of Taiwan FactCheck Center, and we're debunking hoax and the rumors in the Chinese-speaking world, not only spreading in Taiwan, but also in other countries in the Chinese-speaking world. And I think rumors is pretty interesting. It's just like the temperature measures of our society. When people are anxious about coronavirus, then when something happened or something new happened, then there were a lot of claims we will receive from the audience. And I think besides the virus characters or the recipes or the vaccine and the medicine misinformation, but also I want to introduce, there are three kind of specific rumors in Taiwan. The first kind is the coronavirus origin, and so at the beginning we will receive the virus. Since March 2020, we will see there is a big wave of misinformation, and it combined the science, and it's fake science and misinformation, and the narrative will prove the virus is not from Wuhan. And since 2020 until now, those kind of misinformation get stronger, and it's just like a fiction novels, and there are a lot of narratives and different story talk about the virus is from US biolabs. So this kind of misinformation is pretty interesting. It's not only spreading in Mandarin, but also in English and the other language. And the second type is about AZ about AZ vaccine. It's Taiwan is at the first 5 months, the only vaccine we have in Taiwan is AZ. So, but at the same time, including Europe, India, and Japan don't have AZ anymore because people are concerned about the risk and the side effect of AZ. But at that time, AZ is the only brand we have, so it's pretty challenging for us how to do the fact check about AZ, because in Taiwan we need to have vaccine, and the way we treat the risk is totally different from the Europe or other country, because in Europe or in other country, not only there are many brands, and the surprise is pretty. There is full surprise for the vaccine, but in Taiwan the only vaccine is AZ. So when we do the fact checking, how do we evaluate the risk and the risk of AZ side work? It should be depend on Taiwan's status. So and also at that time, a lot of rumors was say the AZ Taiwan have is giving away by other countries, and it's pretty high risk. So it will stop the vaccine. It will postpone. It will make people worried about the vaccine. Make people didn't want to have any vaccine at that time. So at that time, it's our big challenge. And the third part is the conspiracy rumors. In Taiwan, our vaccine rate is over 19, but for the elderly people, they get the vaccine. The rate of having vaccine is lower than other young generation, and we concerned maybe the conspiracy. Those kind of conspiracy rumors tend to be the last straw on their dam, because the elder people worry about the side effect more, and those conspiracy rumors will affect them. And in Taiwan, there are a bunch of conspiracy rumors. They are translated from English, and we find that there are some disinformer. They will consistently translate those conspiracy rumors from English into the Chinese, and spreading on rambles on other social media, because we think because Facebook or YouTube, they have the policy, they will remove those kind of video. So those kind of rumor, they will spread on rambles or other social tech media. And but in Taiwan, we don't have, in the past, we don't have any conspiracy rumors about the vaccine. So sometimes when it translates into Chinese word, it will tend to be very fun event. For example, about the mechanism, in the conspiracy theories, they will say the vaccine will bring the mechanism into your body, so that will that will damage your health. But in Taiwan, those kind of conspiracy tend to be a very fun game. Everyone tries to put the spoons on their arms or on their body, and show show those kind of photos on social media. So it tends to be very fun game, and the people don't worry about conspiracy. So, but for other kind of conspiracy, it is still stop the people to have vaccine.
Thank you. And I want to just pick up on that and go to the others as well, because you've all described the situation in your own environments, but there's a common theme here, which is that misinformation is convening around certain issues, or there are certain mechanisms that are being used to allow it to spread. Summer just mentioned the fun. Now, if fun works in terms of spreading misinformation, that benefits some people. But Shelly and Rachel, you were also kind of talking about what I would describe as wedge issues. So politics as a wedge issue for creating or spreading misinformation around health and science. What could you speak a little bit more about the wedge issues that you've seen being used as a way into to misinformation, or as a way of polarizing people, and then also maybe just like any areas where you've seen people's like concerns, like the human fears and human worries being used as a way of boosting misinformation. Go to Shelly first.
I mean, I was talking about the disinformation campaign, which was targeted around the minorities. I mean, that was the most prominent one that comes to my mind. But one of the narratives, which was also built around the whole anti-vaccine campaign, and something which gave rise to a lot of vaccine hesitancy, like, you know, how Summer was talking about the vaccine hesitancy in Taiwan, was also to do with this whole narrative, which was to do with the fact that the majority is trying to kind of kill the minority, I mean, the smaller groups. And there was a lot of vaccine hesitancy in the rural areas, where, of course, there is a bit of a digital divide. So the messages, the correct messages were not directly reaching out to them. But there was a lot of vaccine hesitancy there, where they felt that there was this, like, the vaccines were invented to eradicate them. The other thing which I would like to mention, which I should have mentioned earlier, was just India's relationship with China, that also contributed a lot in how, because of the politics of the whole issue and the border disputes, which was flaring up at that point in time, it was directly affecting how people were looking at COVID as a pandemic. The whole antipathy was translating into, conspiracy theories, which were to do with the fact that, okay, this is something which has just been done by China to become like the supreme leaders of the world, and should be sort of boycotted. So, I mean, all of these political issues did come into play in a very big way in 2020, 2021, and some of it, I mean, of course, it's still around. So.
Thank you. Rachel.
Yeah, I guess it's worth mentioning that before COVID, vaccine misinformation was still a big problem in our countries. So particularly in somewhere like Pakistan, there's a lot of fear around the polio vaccine, and we saw this repeatedly. And there were, sometimes people in positions of authority that were repeating misinformation about vaccines, and it was causing a lot of difficulty for health professionals in local communities who were actively going into small villages and trying to explain to mothers that they needed to vaccinate their children. And this isn't, COVID has sort of shone a light on this problem around vaccine misinformation, but clearly there was a lot of fear and distrust of Western medicine before this in many of the countries that we cover at AFP. So I think that sometimes there's a deliberate intent there to stop people protecting themselves, perhaps, but sometimes I think it's just a case of fear and anxiety fueling this kind of forwarding of messages either on WhatsApp or on Facebook. Those are two of the main platforms that we see messages being sent.
I want to pick up
I just wanted to add to Rachel's point. I completely agree. There has always been this fear for Western medicine, and with India showing such great numbers with polio vaccination, I just want to add that what is different and what we saw as so different this time around was how social media was just helping this misinformation travel at a low cost, much faster, and to people who you wouldn't imagine would be consuming that. When the polio vaccine drive started in India, and I mean, the way they sort of were able to vaccinate across the country, it was also, I mean, there was a lot of misinformation. There was a lot of fear about taking the vaccine. But at the same time, there were very, very successful ad campaigns which were run to be able to counter that fear and to educate people. But educating had become a challenge, and it became a challenge during the COVID pandemic because the misinformation was traveling much faster, and people were it was just sort of adding on to that fear and creating more hesitancy. So just wanted to butt in there, yeah.
Summer, have you seen this as well?
Yes, followed by Charlene's ideas. Rumors traveled faster than the truth. I think also we have we found that rumors is easy to read, and they are like for the audience, they are easy to understand. So I think sometimes we need to learn from the rumors because how they run faster than the experts say, and how they traveled like wildly by the audience. So I think we need to learn from them. So sometimes we when we look at the rumors, we will think it's just like the quiz or a very excellent opportunity that us can explain the true knowledge to the audience. For example, when the expert explained what is coronavirus, and you can use the high heat to kill the virus, then the people will spreading the rumors and say, hey, turn on the heater, then you won't get the COVID-19, or you can have the hot spring, so you won't have the COVID-19. So it tends to be very easy to understand and easy to follow, but all of them are misinformation. So it's a very good opportunity to educate how high the temperature will kill the virus, and how did you do it in a right way to kill virus and protect yourself. So I think during this time, the news and the newsroom just do the interviews by the expert and the expert officials. They will use academic language or very official and very hard to understand for the audience. But at that time, at the same time, the rumors were spreading because people are anxious, and the rumor is easy to follow, easy to read. But when it was spreading, for the fact checkers, it's a very good opportunity to bring the knowledge again to educate everyone. And because the coronavirus is last until now is 3 years, so during those 3 years, we need to have the true facts. If you don't get the knowledge at the beginning, but you at the end, you need to learn it because the virus is around us. So everyone was forced to learn something about the coronavirus. Everyone was needed to learn the real knowledge to protect yourself. So it's a very valuable opportunity to learn how to next time when we face any kind of pandemic, how do we use the real knowledge, and how do we spread the real knowledge to educate the audience in the better way.
I think that's a very valid point, and I think that we've seen a lot of tools be created, and I'm going to ask you to talk through some of your interventions in a moment. But before we continue talking more about the cure, I wanted to just work out kind of the source. And this panel is titled "The War Against Disinformation." Disinformation usually indicates intent behind the spreading of rumors and misinformation. Have you seen anything, Rachel, that is, intentional disinformation? Have you been able to work out where it's from? Also, what is the intent? I've worked in the kind of mis and disinformation countering space for a long time, and we talk about all of the complex tactics that are used, but what's the end? But the end game is often simple. It's to create distrust in the West. It's to create distrust in government. It's to stop people from voting. That's how simple it has to come down to. So what are you seeing in terms of sources and potential intent?
So one of the main countries we often look at is obviously China, to see whether they are kind of putting information out there deliberately from the government in order to spread misinfo. But the challenge is that depending on which researcher you speak to, it's very hard to say with certainty that the misinfo originated from state actors. And it's also difficult to prove that the bots or the other accounts that are amplifying the message, often copy paste, identical messages. It's difficult to prove with certainty that those accounts are all working in coordination. Some researchers say, if the account has retweeted or has re-amplified the misinfo within a minute of the first account sharing it, then that's evidence of some coordination. But some researchers may say that it's a bit more random than that. And so I would say, unfortunately, because we can't look at who is behind an account, we can only analyze it and make our own kind of conclusions. We often can't prove with certainty that there is a state disinformation campaign. However, there is certainly in Chinese social media, there is certainly evidence of amplification of state media and state narratives that the government wants to get across. So that's working quite effectively for them. And then we've also been looking at it, of course, in relation to the war in Ukraine, because as you know, and as everyone has read, there's an awful lot on Telegram that amplifies the Russian state narrative. So, Ukraine has been a massive igniter of misinformation in the online world, and it will continue to be, and the Russian state will continue to put out certain fake narratives about the war that will be amplified, and we can't always track them very effectively with just human technology.
Thank you. You raised a really interesting point about China, and I want to just actually throw it to Summer, because we see in the UK press today there are reports about a new law being brought in Taiwan to criminalize spreading of rumors and disinformation during wartime, in kind of preparation for just general preparations, I guess. Is that useful? Is that going to work? Is that going to stop the main source of disinformation that you're seeing, if we're talking about kind of where it's originating from?
It's really hard for fact checkers to track where is the disinformer, because even China, for us, when we read the claim or who will benefit from these claims, we will know China will be very suspicious, but we need strong evidence to prove it's China, and it's pretty hard to collect those strong evidence. So we will work with some think tanks or investigation teams. They will do those kind of job. So we will focus to fight against those disinformation. We will focus on communicate with our public. So although we know we know there is a disinformer, and those kind of disinformation is pretty malicious, but what our mission is communicate and do the verification for the public, because the claim was just target their answers, the public's answers. So what we need to do is not arrest the disinformer. What we need to do is bring more real knowledge or real the truth to the public. When public are not anxious and they won't affected by those disinformation, then I think we just solve the problem. So that's our strategy to do that.
Okay, thank you, Shelly. As I bring up your slides to talk about interventions, I just wondered if you could kind of talk about where you think some of this is coming from. And a quick reminder that if anyone wants to ask a question, put their hand up and I will come to you. And I see someone has a question and I will come to you maybe actually in a moment after Shelly's talked about the source of disinformation.
I mean, again, like as Rachel and Summer have pointed out, it's very difficult to sort of establish the connection. But a couple of things that we kind of did as part of, trying to locate the sources was embed one of my journalists. He embedded himself in a bunch of Telegram groups, trying to figure out the conversations that were taking place, trying to track the misinformation and disinformation, and also trying to see how it was journeying, on other social media platforms. Very hard to establish any connect, but yeah, there were a lot of fringe, right-wing groups which were trying to propagate a certain kind of messages. A lot to do with, as I was talking about, targeting like specific communities. At the same time, like propagating the government's messages, which is to sort of jumping the gun and giving them way too much credit. Like, for example, if there was an initiative to pay tribute to frontline workers and light diyas, which is basically earthen lamps, the conversation would then be about how the government knows that you can kill the 14-day virus cycle by doing this. So giving them too much credit, trying to propagate the messages of the government, but yeah, no clear links as to whether, you know, they were directly being or indirectly being sort of backed by, yeah. So
okay.
just.
Thank you. So I'm going to go to Leslie for a question. Leslie, you are in the room. Please go ahead and ask your question.
May I share my slide for the invention?
Yes, just one second, Summer. I'll come to that. I've got a question from Leslie. Leslie, you are in the room. Please, can you unmute and ask away? No. Okay, maybe Leslie will come back in a moment. I'm going to share the slides for interventions, and Leslie, if you have your question, please shout out. Okay, let me share my screen. We're going to go to Shelly first, and if you could go through quite quickly, everyone, and we'll get through.
In terms of interventions, I mean, because we are a digital media company, our interventions were mostly online. It did help that we had a solid health vertical in place and a fact check vertical in place. But yeah, during the COVID pandemic, we saw the messages that were coming in, you know, like on the tip line, it quadrupled. So we do have a tip line in place. That was one of our, you know, like that was one of the big interventions in place, which really helped us gather some of these claims which were being circulated online. The approach that we took during the pandemic was, of course, to break down any jargons, create a huge network of doctors who we could rely on to go back to the fact checks. But I do want to take a moment to talk about this one particular campaign, which the Quint did in collaboration with a bunch of grassroots organizations, and it was carried out in 4 states in India. There was a lot of vaccine hesitancy. We've been talking about it, and through surveys, we established that how in these particular 4 states, densely populated states, there was a lot of vaccine hesitancy and the lack of fact checks, I mean, traveling to these regions. And as part of this initiative, we ran a year-long campaign where we did jingles, we did plays, we did text, videos, and created characters to create fact checks and to make it accessible for women in rural India. So just if you could take us through the slides, this is something that we discovered on the surveys. This is something that you could read and learn more about the project that the Quint ran for a year. We worked with a lot of community correspondents who spoke to women. This was one of the characters which we had created. It says, Kyunki Janki Sab Janti Hai, which basically means because Janki knows everything. Janki, just a friendly woman who interacted with a lot of women on the ground, and we did videos around this character. So the idea of the character was that this is someone who lives next to the biggest hospital in Delhi and is very well informed because she interacts with doctors. And so just creating characters to make it very accessible for rural women to trust and sort of like learn from it. So we did a lot of videos throughout the year, and we were able to reach about 2.5 million people through our videos and through these animations, and also sort of help women get vaccinated, one of the larger groups of people who tend to get ignored when it comes to vaccination. So yeah, these were some of the interventions very quickly.
Thank you. That was an excellent speed through of the interventions. Summer, over to you.
Yes. Yes, I would like to share the useful invention during the infodemic. I think the first one is we proved the civil in Taiwan. The civil power tend to be very strong defense, and the audience tend to be the frontier of the fact checkers. And because next one, because we during this time we have a tip line, and our tip line will collect the suspicious narrative. They are go viral among the audience. So the audience who use our tip line, they will share those suspicious claims to us. So so each day we will collect the claims from our audience. Then we will know what's going on, and we can select the malicious and the malicious rumors and debunking them as fast as we can. And also our database can share to other tip line. And also during this time, there are a lot of experts that helping us do the debunking, including the doctors and the public health experts, and virus scientists. And the next one is and the next slide. Okay, and the next slide, we got the inspiration ideas from the learning by the experts from WHO. So we will know what's going on when we have the vaccine, what kind of vaccine rumors we will have. So because in Taiwan we get the vaccine later than others, so we have the time to publish the playbook about the hoax vaccine. We published the playbook of what stage, what kind of misinformation or disinformation we will have. So we tell our audience in advance what's going on and what kind of misinformation you will have. So it's just like a hoax, the vaccine, to our audience. And also I think the powerful one is the global collaboration project. It's called the Coronavirus Facts Alliance. And this alliance run at the first year. I think they are pretty powerful because we collect all the fact checks we have, and because of the database, we can share our fact checks, and we will save the time to do the fact checking. But unfortunately, in 2021, Christine, the previous vice director of IFCN, did quit the job. So there is no one to run this Coronavirus Facts Alliance. So the database is not good enough, and it didn't collect the data. So if we look back, next time, if we can use the database, and there is an organizer, they can always host and help us to update the database, then it will very powerful and useful for us to debug the those kind of like a conspiracy or anti-vaccine or about the vaccine misinformation, those kind of rumors spreading globally, and we can work in collaboration projects to fight against them.
Thank you. Rachel, what interventions have you seen be effective?
Yeah, so we were actually part of the same coronavirus facts collaboration that Summer just mentioned at AFP, and we found that was great for kind of connecting with other fact checkers and seeing how we could try and cover as much of the COVID disinfo as possible. But we also have a lot of local kind of initiatives, such as in India. We're part of the ECTA collaboration. That is a group of fact checkers working to counter misinfo through WhatsApp tips lines that are partly funded by Meta, where we receive inquiries directly to our newsroom from the public, and we can reply to individual users with our fact checks or short explanations of why something is misinformation, which is a really nice kind of outreach program. And as part of that, we also work with journalism students, and we give training to aspiring journalists in fact checking, and I think this is part of our wider kind of media literacy remit that is becoming increasingly a focus of ours. We are part of the Google News Initiative, and we offer a free training course that people can go online and use and train themselves to be better at fact checking. So that's in English and French and Spanish and Portuguese at the moment, but we hope to launch it in more languages. I can send the link later, but it's digitalcourses.afp.com, and it's aimed at journalists and journalism students, but really anyone can access it. So we find, it's a mix of promoting the fact checking we're doing, but also trying to educate people and give people the tools to fact check for themselves.
Thank you. A reminder to put in questions to the chat for anyone watching at home. It would be a wasted opportunity if one of the first panel sessions of the year focusing on disinformation went by without talking about the potential impact of AI and ChatGPT. So I'm going to put you all on the spot and ask you what your concerns are when it comes to ChatGPT, or not even concerns, where could it be helpful? But what specifically are we looking at for in terms of disinformation, and what do you think the impact could be? What are you already starting to plan? I'll start with Summer and first on this one.
Yes, we are worried about the ChatGPT because it will let the disinformer just has very cost down to spread misinformation. And also I think we are worried like the conspiracy, when conspiracy translated from English into Chinese, with ChatGPT it tend to be easier than before, so we were worried the misinformation spread globally will go viral and go fast than before. And also recently we debunk a rumor, and the rumors use the dialogue from ChatGPT to prove its truth, its fact. So for us, it's the first time we debunking the rumors from ChatGPT. So we are concerned about that, and we hope the Microsoft, the OpenAI team can collaborate with journalists and fact checkers, and they have the way to help fact checkers to use this new technology.
Thank you. Shelly.
I think there are way too many concerns, because I think it has just exploded after it started in November 2022. We are here in February 2023, and just in 3 months, I mean, the monthly active users for ChatGPT was 100 million users in January alone. So I think it's of grave concern, grave concern. Also because things are very, very fast evolving. Couple of things, I mean, I definitely feel like misinformation and disinformation, and there has been some research which has already gone into it. Some very, very good examples which you can find everywhere online about how false narratives can be built very quickly, much faster. Anyone and everyone can do it. There are a few concerns. I mean, Summer mentioned that OpenAI should do something about, trying to help people locate what is created on ChatGPT. It is something that they are trying to do with AI classifier, but it is not they themselves have a disclaimer put out there that it's not reliable at all. So yeah, I mean, I think it's going to get very, very challenging for fact checkers in the coming years. I mean, I think we were already doing so much to counter the narratives, but it's going to get even more difficult. Yeah.
What can we do to stay ahead of the game? Like, so that we're not in a situation we were with social media where it got ahead of us in terms of fact checking. What do we do at this point in time?
So, I feel that with or without AI, one thing that we really need to do as fact checkers is to be able to educate people. I think there is a lot of, it is something that people need to start consuming information with a pinch of salt, where they always sort of have a few questions in mind where they're looking for the source, they're looking for the evidence behind a claim which is being made. They're doing some lateral reading to understand where this might be possibly emanating from. So I feel that what really needs to be done is, making people more literate and educated about the prevalence of misinformation and disinformation, as I said, with or without AI, so that people stop falling for the fake narratives, are able to take a step back, use some critical thinking, use some of it just common sense. Like, for example, there was a very viral image of from Turkey, which was being used, which we had also spoken about earlier, where you can clearly see an image which has been created using AI, and there are like 6 or 7 fingers instead of 5. So I just feel that people just need to become a lot more mindful. I know it's not a solution, it's not going to mitigate the problem that we have in hand, but I also want to say that people really need to start sort of taking information with a pinch of salt. There is a factory of pink slime, publications which are running in the US and Canada. We saw a lot of misinformation traveling from those sites as well during COVID. They were as dangerous as AI, of course, not as fast, but they were as dangerous and as, thanks to social media. So yeah, I think Rachel might have better solutions to this problem.
Rachel, and by the way, we should, if we talked about ChatGPT in the first 5 minutes, we would have had a flood of questions which are now starting to come in on the topic of ChatGPT. So Rachel, what are you doing to mitigate it, or what's your primary concern?
Well, I don't have a magic wand, unfortunately. I think I would agree with Shelly that media literacy is where we should be focusing. I think the problem is, even if we create AI that is effective at countering this disinformation, it could take a while to develop, and it will still need human fact checkers to be able to implement it. Also, what we see is, I think the amount of information online these days means that increasingly what you get is governments feeling that they want to restrict what's available, and that might be for their own political reasons, and that concerns me. So I don't think we're going to solve the problem of misinformation in terms of the amount that's out there, and I don't think that we will ever develop a system that will eradicate it, but we need to empower people to either take time out from the internet, or to understand what they're viewing on the internet, and to not be as misled by it. I think that would be a better use of our time.
Okay, so just to address some of the questions, Sashi is from the Press Institute of India in Chennai, and mentions the fact that the FT CEO says ChatGPT cannot replace good journalism, and that rather than fearing AI, the FT and we should understand it, use it, and hold its proprietors accountable. And that ChatGPT isn't going to break a story, or will it be able to? Is it going to be able to break, or is it going to be able to break the internet, or is it going to be able to break fact checking or help fact checking? I think some of you've already answered that, but we talked about actually the negatives. Can you see ways that it can help your work?
I think I can see how it could enhance or expand on what we do, and maybe be used to have more reach within our organization. But I haven't seen evidence that it's sophisticated enough to do the job of a human fact checker. And I must emphasize, and I'm sure the other panelists will say the same, we have multiple people working on a fact check. There's editors, 2 rounds of editing at least, so it's not just one person.
Also, just to add to Rachel's point, I mean, there is also enough evidence to show that AI lacks, I mean, it's collecting data from everywhere on the internet. So it lacks a lot of, there is evidence to show that how it can be racially biased, how it can be xenophobic. And so it will all translate into more problems in the coming days, unless it can be nipped in the bud in a way where it is more useful than dangerous. Yeah, but I also feel that this question is a bit to do with losing jobs, which I feel is only going to evolve, not so much. Yeah, but yeah, like no use case as of now that we are using.
Okay, well, I'll come back to you this time next year and expect lots of examples of the use cases. Summer, how can you see a way to harness it for good?
You mean AI or
AI, ChatGPT? Yep.
Yeah. I think if we look our working process, I think there are several different process. One is how we collect the data, the narrative from the audience, and how we do the monitoring. And the second part is how we do the verification and how we do the fact check. And the last part is how we spread our fact checks to the audience. And also, like ChatGPT is pretty good at customer service, talk to people. So if the ChatGPT can use our database, then it can provide the like a human customized service to the audience. The audience can talk to our tip line just like talk to our customer service. And actually behind our tip line there are 1.5 full-time staff to do the service. So if the ChatGPT can do well, then we can it can save us some time and the energy to do the customer service. But the ChatGPT,
and hopefully the energy for the service, saving the energy for the service doesn't mean saving, reducing the people working on it. As well. There's a question I'm just conscious of time. We've got about 1.5 minutes left. Lucy, who's community editor for the FT, asks if there's any can the panel suggest any ways that we can reduce disinformation in comments, maybe especially ones posted by supposed readers that could actually be bots. Does anyone have a very quick 20-second solution to that?
I'm sorry. Yeah, we don't have comments on our story, so difficult.
Okay, no problem.
What we typically do is, since the disinformation is being posted online, instead of just going and deleting those comments, it's important that you're educating them. So as and when we have stories, we try and kill them with kindness by putting the story which is relevant and sort of also spreading that message. So one thing, you can't delete them, but you can always put the right information out there.
So in our remaining minute, and I'm going to limit you to 20 seconds each, are we winning the war against disinformation in science and health journalism? Rachel?
I think we are fighting a difficult battle. I don't think we're winning it, but I don't think we're losing it either. I like to be an optimist. I think we are getting better every day at kind of countering the misinfo.
Thank you. Summer, are we winning the disinformation war?
Yes, I think when we went through the pandemic, we have already formed a strong civil power front line to defend misinformation. So that's what we get. But for the near future, we need to work efficiently and also smarter than this time.
Thank you. Shelly?
I feel it's a war worth fighting for. So I wouldn't say we are winning it, but we need to be at it. And I think that's what we are all doing.
Wonderful, thank you. So thank you to all of the panelists today for your contributions. I would love to follow up in a year's time on the role of AI in your workflows. If you've enjoyed this session, there is another session next Tuesday. Also, I will be there as well, and hopefully that doesn't put you off. But we'll be talking about the next big health story with some experts in looking forwards to potential health crisis in the future. One of you also asked in the question about resources. There is a great resource out there, a brand new resource from WAN-IFRA and Temasek, which is the Journalism in the Age of Pandemics Guide 2.0, and that covers mis and disinformation as one of the principal chapters. And then it just leaves me to say that this webinar was made possible, but with the support from Temasek Foundation, a foundation that supports a diverse range of programs that uplift lives and communities in Singapore and beyond. Its programs strengthen social resilience, foster international exchange and regional capabilities, advance science, and protect the planet. Thank you very much to all the panelists and for everyone attending today, and please do have a great day.
Thank you.